Welcome, everyone, to the B2B Influence Spotlight on Industry Game Changers. I'm Paula Chiocchi, your host. Today, we have Kathleen Lucente. She is the CEO of Redfin Communications. And Kathleen assists tech companies in transforming complex ideas into compelling narratives that drive measurable impact across the sales funnel. Now, I don't think a lot of people think in terms of PR is providing that function, and we all know how complicated it can be to talk about tech and get it down to even the layman's understanding or thought process. So we're fortunate to have Kathleen to dive in and let her show us how she does that.
Oh, Paula, it's great to be with you today. Thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to diving into this conversation.
Of course. So Kathleen, with strategic communications at the heart of Randfed's offering, but in today's B2B landscape, how do you ensure that the messaging strategies directly support pipeline generation, lead conversion, and sales enablement efforts?
This is a topic that's always hot when it comes to marketing and communications, and it hasn't simmered down in any way. In fact, I think it's heated up more. One of the things that I've been lucky enough to do is as really work with our clients on brand positioning narrative work. And it's not just about pretty words. It's really digging in and interviewing their sales team, understanding even their customers, talking to them about what hooked those customers, what did they find attractive in the process. And what we're doing is we're doing interviews internally and externally, and they're anonymous interviews that we're able to then bring back to the client and have them see this is the way things were described by your client. We're also working with the sales team and understanding what were some of the friction that they were running into where maybe the client decided to, their client target client decided to go with a different company or choice. Really understanding where things fall apart so that we can help them have the language to communicate at the corporate level, but also in the sales level. And so brand positioning for us is the keystone to any marketing and communications effort. And often when we do this work, it then changes quite a bit. So the playbook comes out, it's all the different language. We are able to identify where the problems are in terms of communication. And then we're able to help them say, hey, you need to change these things on your website. This is how you need to change the way you're talking in a sales call. This is what you need to be doing when you're giving a presentation. What you thought was landing was not landing. Let us help you evolve that. Public relations is much more than media relations. It really is thinking about all the stakeholders that you're trying to communicate with and understanding what is going to work with each group.
And I would think that probably traditionally companies don't really appreciate that because I think they think of PR as, like you said, media relations. And the fact that you do all that research ahead of time seems key.
Yeah, I think that we attract the kind of clients that want this type of support. They don't always know it when they walk in the door. A lot of times when a client shows up on the phone with an email at our door, they're showing up for a reason that maybe their sales team isn't getting, doors aren't opening for them. And so the brand is not recognized. And so we start to dig into that. We say, we're not going to just start throwing darts and putting press releases out. That's not going to get you where you want to be. Let's do something a little bit more analytical and like prescriptive. It's not going to slow us down, but it is going to make sure that every dollar you spend is the right dollar and it's data backed. And that does hook people. They love that because they've probably worked in other experiences where they just start putting out press releases thinking, if we could just get this one article, it's going to solve everything. And that's usually not the case. Really, there's a layered effect to how things work. And once companies have experienced that, they really don't want to go back to the old way of doing things.
So you help them transform.
We do. And it's so exciting to watch the things change for them and we're able to measure that. And then often the big one is you start to get the sales team not being combative with the marketing team. It's more now, hey, we're doing this together. And when we start doing this together, we can really make some magic happen. And then the C-suite also sees that and says, this is a really well functioning team as opposed to siloed work.
Which is usually what, so
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
helping bridge that.
Yeah, and I've been observing this for a long time. I had the benefit of working within large banks and major well-known tech companies like JP Morgan and IBM. I ran PR with IBM Research. I was also at JP Morgan in New York City, but also internationally. And so really helping even corporate when I was at JP Morgan, helping them understand what messaging worked in the region, what versus what didn't work in the region.
Mhm.
So I've been able to see this from a couple different angles, and it's been very beneficial to just take that knowledge and carry it through for startups and middle market companies, because if they can get it right early on, it's a lot harder when you're a big behemoth company to
Mhm.
start changing things. But if you can get this foundation right early on, you're going to save money and you're going to be a little bit more nimble, and your sales should reflect that.
And I would think different regions react differently to messaging, and getting the
Oh,
messaging right is
100%. Translating everything from visuals to words. I was in charge of 18 countries for JP Morgan. And I listened very carefully to my counterparts in those markets and was able to relay that information back to corporate and our big advertising agency as well around, hey, this is what's working and this is what's not working.
Mhm.
And being a trusted advisor, even inside a company where I was trusted because I had been in New York, I'd been at corporate. They would listen to me because I was a known entity on the ground, and I could translate what was working and what wasn't working. And that made a big difference.
And I'm sure satisfying that people are listening to you.
I feel like it's so important I think it's hard in big companies when people maybe were hired and they're very far away in another country and they're trying to relay something and they don't have a trusted ally. It's one of the hardest jobs. And I have great respect for all of my colleagues, and felt like my ability to help them get that word across and make the right changes was so important. And we saw huge impact. We went from number 5 in the region to number 1. And that was a cumulative effect of changing our messaging, really being proactive, and putting our money where our mouth was in terms of showing we were committed as a company to each region.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you bring that to your clients today. So, with Redfan serving as a trusted advisor many times, as you just mentioned, during leadership transitions, IPOs, excuse me, acquisitions, how do you guide clients in evaluating PR's return versus more attribution focus like paid media or direct response?
I think especially right now, Paula, as we move into this zero click world where 85% of B2B sales is happening with just the knowledge of a company versus clicking through on anything and using AI to quickly understand. I think it's really interesting. We're looking at a couple different ways to help our clients measure the impact of the work. So number one, right now we're doing a ton in the M&A space. We have lots of companies that are growing by acquiring other companies. And one of the big things there is you could put a lot of time and money into building up to a successful M&A acquisition, just the transaction itself. But if you don't put the stakeholder messaging together and your customer finds out about the M&A through an article or a press release, they're going to lose a lot of faith in you. So we're really helping our clients understand that you need to be in charge of the messaging and how you're going to communicate to your customers the morning of the acquisition and what it means to them. And the fallout, our clients are pretty sophisticated in that. They understand if they don't do that, the blowback is so bad that they would lose customers, have board members be annoyed. They spend a lot of time cleaning up a mess that should have been a success and a celebration. Instead, they wouldn't be doing a very good job. It's very different than measuring press clips like the good old days, right? I remember those press clip books when I was in my 20s where it was like a tomb. And one of the things that's very interesting is that we set up goals with our clients on every announcement before we put it out, right? So what is success even going to look like for this? Is it just really getting the word out and we're not expecting much? Is it really a news driving piece of information where we're going to do some selective pitching in advance of the article or the press release coming out? So measuring that, and then using AI is also really important. So the other day, I was sitting in a meeting with a client who runs a big science conference, and we were talking about it's an invite-only conference, and we have very select speakers. So we're trying to decide which speakers should be at it. And I quickly pulled up AI. I looked at who's the most relevant speakers in the cannabis cultivation space, which was a topic. And our client came up to the top. They happened to build the hardware for growing.
Wow.
They do LED lights.
Okay.
So our client came up at the top. The second person was a professor at a university who's written a lot of books. I then asked the question, which of these two are in the press the most? And it quickly showed me that our client was much more in the technical scientific publications, whereas this other gentleman was in the more national. And guess what? That's okay because that's exactly what our goal was.
Okay.
Now the question is, how do we stay there? How do we keep our position there? Or if I'm using a tool like Cision, or there's many tools that compete with Cision, a lot of companies aren't using it very effectively. So what we're doing is we'll say, okay, fine, we'll look at share of voice, your company versus
Mm.
other companies. But I want to look at, if we're building a thought leadership platform, I want to look like I just did on ChatGPT. I want to look at your CEO versus your competitor's CEO, or your CTO versus the others. Let's benchmark where they are right now. What are they actually talking about?
Yeah.
What do you want to be known as an authority as? And then how do we then start to look at that where we are now and start build over the next 6 months? And so that gets them very excited. And because that opens up so many other doors.
And what did you do previous to ChatGPT? That was a lot of research, right?
You really would have to, there are tools in the PR industry. There are many competing tools. There was a company here in Austin, Texas called Trendkite, which we loved. They were bought by a bigger company. Of course, when a tool is bought by a bigger company, unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't quite stand up to the way you loved it in the past, which unfortunately is true. But I really loved the fact that I could go in and look at, if an article came out, I could see it, who clicked through to my client's website. It gave me that level of data. I also had the ability to do comparison with spokespeople within that. I could build out dashboards. And one of the things that we love doing is helping our clients know, like, when do you have your next board meeting?
Mm.
Making sure the CMO has data that they can share in that board meeting that would be relevant to the board or to the C-suite. And so they have a succinct slide on, here's what matters. And it's high impact data that they're able to come in. And so we customize that for each client based on what is going to matter to them.
It sounds like a lot of deep dive and a lot of work and a lot of value that you're giving.
I think PR has always been one of the hardest things to measure. And I think that we do a lot of other things that aren't as measurable. So we have a client who has a major conference. We're helping them think through who should be the keynote speaker. And there's a tendency to go grab just a one-off keynote speaker. But the reality is that if you really think it through and you make sure that your event team is connected to your marketing team, you can find a great speaker like Jason Dorsey, who is also runs his own research facility. And he looks at generational behaviors.
Mhm.
And I love working with him because, for example, I can help a client think through, okay, he can do a customized talk at your conference, but he also could do customized research on, you name it, how things are changing in the construction business or how things are changing in the banking space and how consumers want to interact different generations. And you can carry that through. Instead of it being a one-off speaker engagement, it could be, hey, let's have this person at our customer conference, and then let's do some research 2 months later so that the clients that attended that conference or did not attend and wish they had start to see that this is more than just a one-off speaker, that there's more to it. And I think helping CMOs be able to think those things through versus the rush, let's find a speaker and it's one and done. Speakers cost a lot of money, but if you can put the strategy around it and it can carry some more weight to it, that can be a very high impact part of your marketing. And it has PR obviously associated with it.
Right, right. So you mentioned the AI. You obviously don't see it as a threat, I think, or do
I,
you?
I I think AI is a friend. I really do. I think that there are things that you do have to think about AI being a threat if people are not using it correctly. They're using attributions or things like that where they're going to get sued because they didn't actually really understand the legality. So I think that there are really strong rules and accountability that every company has to have in terms of making sure employees understand how and when to use AI. And I think that anything customer facing absolutely has to have those rules, including even product development. So that with that caveat, I look at the other side of it. I think that I love Claude, for example, and I find that it's fantastic for short circuiting research that I need to do. I think it's fantastic for used for formatting a note that I'm trying to get my head around,
Yeah.
but it's not replacing the human. It can't replace that thought leadership. And I think when we start to go in that direction, or where you lose the voice of a thought leader or an expert, then you're losing the whole point, because AI eventually what you want it to do is to find your expert and be citing your expert. So that requires companies to do fantastic thought leadership and be answering questions that with authority that are not being answered effectively, so that and in a consistent way. And that way AI really becomes a friend to companies. Like the example I gave where I was looking for who's the top spokesperson. I didn't know that my client was going to come to the top, but it did. And I
Yeah.
was just delighted because
Well,
that's what we want,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Be at the top. Yeah, we use AI and we think of it as a friend as well. But
Yeah.
talking to some agencies, there's especially the bigger they are, it seems like adopting any of these things that can help them position their clients better in terms whether it's paid media, PR, whatever, that they're not making the shift as fast. I'm talking about the big conglomerates.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be, I think companies that don't embrace AI in some capacity are going to get left in the dust. I think that
Yeah.
we have to be transparent and honest about how we're using it. I think every client should know how agencies are or are not using AI. I think that is just like any tool that we would be using, but it's the way of the future. It's not replacing thought leadership. It's not replacing customized writing for the Wall Street Journal, or it's not going to write your press releases for you. It's not going to, but it can give you ideas as you're trying to think through process, or you're trying to consider if I'm trying to create a blog series, here's what we've done in the past. What are the things we should do moving forward? It's a great place for putting all your research in key areas, but it's also you have to be very careful. It's about confidentiality. You're not putting things out there that you don't want expanded into the world. So I think it just has to be used wisely. And I actually just wrote a piece on why clients do need to take the time to put a policy together. A great example would be a sales team wants to start using AI. Marketing doesn't know that sales team is using AI. Chief people officer doesn't know that sales team is using AI. Next thing you know, there's something happens, a legal breach or something, or somebody's uploaded a document that nobody should have uploaded. That's why companies have to have policies, and ignorance around it and hiding from it is actually could cause more damage for companies if they don't understand and actually ease into it and put the right policies in place. I think it would be almost egregious not to.
It's making me think about we have outsourced HR for ourselves, but talking to them about updating our policy for
Yeah.
that
Oh,
because
I was just at a conference, the Culturati conference over the summer, and they had different speakers, and I was really intrigued. The head of a chief people officer for Microsoft, he has AI reporting into him. All AI across the entire company reports to him, not to the chief technology officer. And I thought it was interesting how they thought through why AI needs to report to him. And he travels all around and he's talking to people and updating their policy. And it's really important.
you probably better than anybody that I know understands that how hard it is to build the brand and a valuable brand and how quickly it can be, I don't want to go so far as to say destroyed, but damaged.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why everything has to be done in a thoughtful approach. It's not just
Mhm.
a free for all. A lot of companies that I've met that are in high growth, some of the big mistakes that high growth companies have is that everyone's allowed to just buy whatever tools they want. And suddenly they have all these expenses around different tools in different departments. Understanding what your tech stack is, including your AI part of your tech stack, is super important. You want to know what are people using within your company and then have policies.
Yeah, for sure. This has been very enlightening, Kathleen.
I'm glad.
I enjoyed our conversation today. If
Same.
somebody wants to have a chat with you and maybe is in the tech space and wants to learn a bit more about what you can do for them, how would they be able to get a hold of you?
Well, there's a couple of ways. They could always follow me on LinkedIn. Also, I'm at Kathleen at redfancommunications.com. So feel free to reach out. And our website, redfancommunications.com. Just highlighting Red Fan was my sayonara to the corporate world. And it
Oh,
is, I named it Red Fan because when you look at a fan, it's got many fins and it takes great people, great community, great technology, great clients, all of that coming together. And that's how a fan is created. So I try to make sure people know that is the reason why we are named Red Fan Communications.
I'm glad you shared that because I wasn't aware of that. And that shows you gave a lot of thought process to even your own brand yourself. So,
Yep,
yeah,
absolutely.
awesome.
I had lots of thoughts about it and it came straight to me and it's been true. We're now 17 years old, so we're
Congratulations.
almost adults.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Kathleen, so much.
Thanks so much. Have a great day, Paula.